Welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola. My co-host today is a screenwriter who just made a pretty astonishing feature film debut. His first movie out of the gate? Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino and starring Zendaya, which has been the talk of cinemas ever since its release and might be the biggest four-quadrant movie of the year. Your mom likes it. Your Gen Z sister likes it. Millennials like it. Justin has a much longer history as a writer for the stage, and he also garnered a lot of views with a YouTube channel he wrote and starred in shorts for back in the 2010s. Justin's recent but intense love for tennis and his desire to capture lightning in a bottle are both big parts of why he identifies with Billy Beane, Brad Pitt's character in the 2011 film Moneyball. Justin Kuritzkes, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started today, in addition to all those polymath things?
I mean, that was so comprehensive. I feel, I already feel very seen by this podcast. That was a good rundown. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, what a fascinating sort of point to intersect with Luca Guadagnino. I'm a big fan of his. His Suspiria is one of my favorite movies of fully all time.
Absolutely.
He makes me believe that art is possible because he just keeps getting to make movies. And all of his movies are fascinating and adventurous. But I got to go to the premiere of this one in LA, and he said I was kind of wondering. I was wondering ahead of time. I was like, is this like he's made some really like very talked about movies. I was like, but is this like the biggest premiere deal he's had? And he got up there and he was like, this is my first big LA premiere. So you wrote Luca Guadagnino's first big LA red carpet premiere movie. That's pretty crazy.
It's very cool. I mean, it was a cool moment for me as well, because I grew up in LA, and I remember, we had our premiere in Westwood at the Westwood Village Theater, which is this kind of iconic, beautiful theater that if you grow up in LA, you know that that's where the big movies
for sure
happen. So it was incredibly meaningful to me. But I didn't know that was the first time Luca had a LA premiere until he said that. Yeah.
Just you and Luca having firsts together. How exciting.
Yep.
Well, the character you have brought to discuss today, I really appreciated as I was reading interviews that you did and rewatching this movie. I was very pleased to see like the intersection of themes in the movie that you wrote and things that you talk about. And you brought to the table Billy Beane, Brad Pitt's Billy Beane from the movie Moneyball.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Did you see Moneyball when it first came out? Did you come to Moneyball later? Tell me about you and Billy Beane.
I find weirdly that Moneyball is a sort of comfort movie for me. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think it has a resonance for a lot of people in the arts, and especially people in film and theater, because it's essentially a movie about a producer, and sometimes it's a movie about an agent, but he really feel, or like a studio head, but he really feels like a independent film producer to me.
Billy, I need more money.
We don't have any
I can't
more money,
compete
Billy.
against a $120 million payroll with $38 million.
But we're not going to compete with these teams that have big budgets. We're going to work within the constraints that we have, and you're going to get out and do the best job that you can recruiting new players. We're not going to pay $17 million a year to players.
I'm not asking you for tens of 20, $30 million. I'm just asking you for a little bit of help. Just get me a little bit closer, and I will get you that championship team. I mean, this is why I'm here. This is why you hired me. And I got to ask you, what are we doing here?
Billy,
If it's not to win a championship.
I want to win just
That's my bar. My bar is here. My bar is to take this team to a championship.
Billy, we're a small market team, and you're a small market GM. I'm asking you to be okay not spending money that I don't have. And I'm asking you to take a deep breath, shake off the loss, get back in a room with your guys, and figure out how to find replacements for the guys we lost with the money that we do have.
I'm not leaving here. I can't leave here with that.
What else can I help you with?
It's a story about a guy who's not on the field. And in fact, very little of the movie happens on the baseball field.
Right.
I think there's maybe like one scene that's happening in real time on a baseball field. So it's a movie all about the site of the stadium. It almost all happens in the stadium or in that building or in the offices around this place, but not actually on the field. And that felt like kind of all the time I've spent in the administrative offices of off-Broadway theaters, or all the time I've spent in production offices. So it feels really resonant on that level to me. But yeah, I've seen that movie a lot, and without even really trying to. I don't plan to watch that movie, but I end up watching it.
Is it one of those ones that, like, if it came up on HBO, it's like no matter where it's at in the movie, you're like, oh, Moneyball.
I have to. Yeah, there's no choice. I have to just click into it, and I don't quite know what it is about it that I find so comforting, but it's hard for me to turn that one off.
Well, it's interesting. Like, a thing that I found, like, watching it through the lens of, like, considering, you know, your interviews that I've read and watching Challengers, it is, I feel like normally movies about obsession have much more of like an obvious intensity. I feel like Challengers is one of those movies. Like, the intensity just sort of courses throughout it. I've read you talking about it, saying, like, there's really no downtime in the movie. Like, you're kind of always in a state of, like, heightened engagement. But Moneyball is as much a movie about obsession as a very fraught sports drama is, but it's the most, like, low vibe presented intensity possible. Like, at a certain point, it's a story of, like, Billy Beane, the GM of the Oakland A's in around the early 2000s, when he realizes that as a small market team, they do not have the funds to compete for a title the way that the Yankees would compete for a title. So they can't play Yankees baseball. They've got to play cheap baseball. They've got to play Moneyball.
Yeah.
Billy, we got 38 home runs and 120 RBIs.
Guys, you're still trying to replace Giambi. I told you we can't do it, and we can't do it. Now, what we might be able to do is recreate him. Recreate him in the aggregate.
The what?
Giambi's on-base percentage was .477. Damon's on base, .324. And Almeida's was .291. Add that up and you get...
You want me to speak?
What up, point of you get?
1092.
Divided by 3.
It's 364.
That's what we're looking for. Three ball players whose average OBP is...
364.
Wait a minute, that doesn't look right, doesn't come out right.
That's right, Artie.
And so he assembles essentially a team by the odds and by the metrics that can, on base percentage, like, just move around men, score enough runs to be in the conversation. And Brad Pitt is the one that bets on, like, the young quant, Jonah Hill's young quant character who comes in and they basically quantify baseball. But this is as much a movie, even though it is kind of in a sort of consistent, thoughtful tone. It is a movie about obsession. And I feel like Challengers is very presently about obsession. Luca is a man who makes movies often about obsession and desire. And I wanted to hear from you about this movie, which also seems to have emerged from your sort of late and intense onset obsession with tennis as a sport that you enjoy after you watched a sort of seminal match between Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka. So tell me about obsession and your sort of past with it and it as a thread around through your work.
Well, I think obsession is a very important part of any sort of creative endeavor, you know, because for example, I'm not obsessed with baseball. I don't really even watch baseball or know much about it, but you can tell that whoever wrote the book, you know, that Michael Lewis is obsessed with baseball in this deep way, and that Aaron Sorkin and Steve Zalian are obsessed with baseball or they're at least tapping into the obsession that Michael Lewis has, you know. There's a sort of deep, you can feel the knowledge and the obsession of the writing coming off the screen when you watch that movie. And so it is transmuted to you through the screen. And it doesn't really matter whether you went in caring about this thing at all. And I think that's what any successful work of art does, really, is it, for the time that you're spending with it, it does a good job convincing you that this is a thing worth being obsessed about. So for me, with Challengers, I found myself around 2018, you know, I hadn't been a massive tennis fan up until I watched this match with Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka in the final of the US Open. And there was this very controversial call where Serena Williams was accused of receiving coaching from the sidelines. And immediately this struck me as this intensely cinematic thing where, you're all alone on this court with this thing you're obsessed with, that you've devoted your whole life to, and you're playing in front of thousands of people who have all different kinds of relationships to the sport. Maybe somebody is watching their first tennis match that day. Maybe somebody has been a fan of your career the whole time. But you know that there's one other person there who is as obsessed with tennis and is as obsessed with your tennis as you are.
Yeah.
Which is your
Their
coach.
tennis has as much of effect on you as it does on them.
Yeah, and you can't talk to them. And so immediately it struck me, well, what if you really needed to talk about something? And what if it was beyond tennis? What if it was about what was going on with you guys? And what if it somehow involved this person on the other side of the court? And so right when I started thinking about that, this parallel process happened where I was watching a lot of tennis at first kind of as research, but I knew as I was doing it that what was really happening was that I was becoming an obsessive tennis fan.
So easy to do. That happened to me over summer break in like middle school. It was suddenly like the only thing I was watching was Wings on USA and tennis.
Wow. I want to talk about Wings because that show meant a lot to me too.
Maybe my first binge watch show was Wings because they would play a 2-hour block of it, 4 episodes of it at a time every afternoon on USA.
Wings is how you really know you were raised by the television, because there's no reason for you to be watching that show unless you're watching television at crazy hours.
Summer of Suits needs to give way to the winter of Wings.
Yes, exactly. The winter of Wings. That's the final Game of Thrones book, is the Winter of Wings.
Well, I gotta go.
Where are you going?
To fulfill my mission in life. Every time Carol lays waste to one of you Hackett boys, I have to pick up the pieces.
You're going to the Prudential building?
Joe, Carol is not going to show up. Brian's going to be left there devastated.
Well, I don't think it'll be that bad.
Oh, no. Remember how you felt when she broke up with you? You cried on my shoulder for 2 weeks. My skin's still a little pruny.
Yeah, but tennis really, because I was new to it too, it was sort of this endless, there was this endless backlog of matches I could watch. I wasn't just watching, and a lot of them are uploaded to YouTube in full. So I was watching not just, the matches that were happening that year, but also famous matches from 20 years ago. And sort of, it felt like becoming a cinephile again, but for tennis. And so I really started to ask myself this like existential question, which was, what could I write that would be as good as tennis? And what would make tennis even better? And what I landed on was that it would make tennis even better if I could understand precisely what was at stake for everybody at every moment of the match. And I think how that relates to Moneyball is that Moneyball is my favorite kind of sports movie where the stakes are not, the stakes of the movie and the stakes of the characters are not the same as the stakes of the official stakes of sports.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, the climactic game in Moneyball, you get like one scene on the field and everything else is Brad Pitt stressed.
And by the way, that game doesn't compare to the stakes you feel in that scene with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill when they're trying to make these 3 deals at the same time.
Yeah, get the Ricardo Rincon trade in like the middle of the season of the All-Star break. Yeah.
Okay, let me talk to my owner. I'll call you back. Thanks.
Get Steve on the phone.
Shot or Phillips?
Why would we call Phillips back? Phillips has got to call us.
Tell him I'm on the other line.
Hi, Mr. Schott. It's Peter Brand. I apologize for putting you on hold earlier. Billy asked me to call you back. He's on another line.
We want $225,000 for Rincon.
Billy says he needs $225,000 for Ricardo Rincon. Please. Yes, I added the please at the end. Okay, let me hold on 1 second, please.
Tell him I'll pay for him. But when I sell him back for twice the amount next year, I keep the money.
Okay, so Billy says he'll pay for Rincon himself. But when he sells him for more money next year, he's keeping the profit. Okay, thank you very much. We'll call you back. Thank you. Come on! Come on!
And Jonah Hill, I mean, this is a podcast, so you can't see, but Jonah Hill does this thing with his hand where he crunches it into this like fist of victory after they've successfully, and I think, by the way, they've only made like $200,000 at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
You know, like nothing in a sports, in a sports team's budget, but for them, it means the world. And so if you can make me click into the stakes of that matters so much more to me than watching a movie about winning a championship, or winning a Grand Slam. I don't care, because if I want to tap into those stakes, I'll just watch real sports, which will be better. They will be better, So yeah, I think Moneyball is one of those movies like Bull Durham or like He Got Game, or like Fat City, the great boxing movie Fat City. It's a movie where the stakes are personal. They're not the stakes that get broadcast to the world. They're the stakes that are a little secret that you're led into as the audience member.
Well, and that makes me this is gonna sound like such an obtuse question, because it's kind of like, well, obviously I'm a fucking writer, but with, the stakes behind the stakes. And obviously that's what we're working with in Challengers. And that's what we're working with in Moneyball. And thinking about, you're reading about your book, Famous People, sort of what are the conversations that are happening behind the conversation? You seem like somebody who has a very strong draw toward the conversations of others. And again, obviously you're a fucking screenwriter, but almost like this fanficification of, like you said, what if we could follow their every thought, within a match, these two people, what if they need to have this conversation? And I wanted to hear how that is kind of played out in your life as a creative. Are you someone who sits and wants to overhear conversations? Are you sort of drawing wild speculation about passersby? How does that sort of seeded your creativity throughout your life?
I mean, I think that's a part of a lot of people's, especially writers,
right?
lives.
Again, obtuse question.
Nosiness. I mean, I think that's why so many filmmakers are drawn to noir as a form, because a noir is all about your curiosity winning over your survival instinct. You're so obsessed with finding out the truth about something that you put yourself at great risk knowingly. That's what a noir hero is. And I think every writer kind of feels like a connection to that. I think when it comes to, I would call it a sort of interest in behind the scenes. I've always been drawn to that. I've always been drawn to things where there's a presentational, official front that's given. And, and then I've always wanted to know, well, what's right behind that? What does the lighting rig look like? What does the dressing room look like? What does it look like in the car on the way to the event? And I think that's just because it's a sort of intensified version of something that everybody is going through all the time, which is that you have your public personality that you present to the world, your face that you put on in the morning, and then the way you dress yourself and walk through the world and behave at your desk or wherever you work, and then there's the part of you that's under that, behind that only very few people know about. And I think for a famous person or for somebody who's a performer, because I think athletes are performers.
Oh, absolutely.
That's just sort of dramatized and intensified in a really sharp way.
I absolutely, I hadn't watched Moneyball in a while, so putting it on, I forgot how just like effective, like one of those early scenes is when it's Billy with like all of his scout pool and listening to a bunch of old men go around a table and talk about like great body on that guy, like 5-tool guy, got the face for it, total package. And I was just so fascinated at this like meat market of discussing like high performance machine athletes, but like the meat market of discussing them as components of a team.
I like guys like that got a little hair on their ass.
He looks like a Mandel or a Mays, quite frankly. He's got a baseball body.
Matty, who do you got?
I like Geronimo.
Yes.
Hey, guy's an athlete, big, fast, talented.
Top of my list. Clean cut, good face.
Yeah, good jaw.
5-tools guy, good-looking ball player.
Can he hit?
Yeah, he's got a beautiful swing, right, Barry?
The ball explodes off his bat.
He throws the club head at the ball, and when he connects, he drives it. It pops off the bat. You can hear it all over the ballpark.
A lot of pop coming off the bat.
And it's effort.
If he's a good hitter, why doesn't he hit good?
Well, I think that's so real, and it's something I was thinking about a lot as I was becoming a real sports fan, which I hadn't been, in most of my life, which was that sports fans are drama queens.
Oh God, nobody's a bigger drama queen than a man who is dedicated to his team.
Yeah, like, and as a person who writes drama, I was kind of jealous of the way that sports, the kind of investment that sports get from viewers. Like I would kill to write something that would make somebody want to break their television. And sports do that every day. Every day across America, televisions are being broken because a team lost.
I've walked out of a room crying before the end of a game because I just couldn't stand to watch it, and I couldn't stand to watch the Ducks lose again.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, and tennis makes me cry all the time, and I'm very embarrassed by it, but it happens.
There's no greater human drama than the lovers' quarrel that is a tennis match.
I think that's very real.
Like, put Rafa and Fetty on that court over and over again, and you're not going to have... I mean, their affair, it stretches decades at this point. It's like his longest relationship besides Mirka.
There you go. Yeah. There's a lot of deep history there, and you naturally, as a viewer, project a lot onto that may or may not be there. But I think in many ways, the experience of writing Challengers was me projecting a lot onto these people who I don't know, and imagining a backstory for this match that would make it more exciting for me, because hedonistically, that's what I wanted. That would be the best thing in the world for me to watch, just in terms of like pleasure, in terms of like the kind of experience I want to have as a consumer of entertainment. That would be the deepest entertainment to me, is watching a tennis match where I knew everything about them. And so, as it relates to Moneyball, again, if you go back to that scene, the way that those guys are talking about the players, they could just as easily be a group of fashion consultants talking about runway models, and saying really cutting and sort of horrible and judgmental things about the people who are going to make the cut or not to walk the runway in a campaign, or in a show. But those guys in that room would never acknowledge that about what they're doing, and that's fascinating to me too. That I wonder even the extent to which they recognize themselves as showmen. And I think what's exciting about Billy Beane in that movie is that he kind of does. He kind of understands that this is a production.
Right.
We're putting on a show here. And we're at a disadvantage. And if we try to, if you put it in the language of making movies, he's like a shoestring budget indie going, if we try to play like Marvel in here, we're going to lose to Marvel out there.
Right. Yeah. If we try to make Endgame, it's not going to work. But maybe we can make, Chronicle. Maybe we can make Chronicle in this room.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's real. Especially, I mean, the part of that I relate to in a big way too is that you think about trying to make people go to the movies, and most of the movies that people show up for are movies where the stakes are the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right? That's the stakes of that story, is that the world is at risk. And humanity will be wiped out.
Right, yeah.
And so the question becomes, okay, well, how do you make stakes that feel like that? You know, how do you make stakes that are that intense? And that's what Billy Beane is trying to figure out with the resources he has, and with the money he's got, and with the team he's got. How can he stand a chance in this marketplace against these behemoths, you know?
How has your training in theater, where not being the world that I'm versed in, it seems like there is a latitude for a sort of experimentalism, or perhaps an edge to it, and to be able to stage that kind of edge and experimentalism or audaciousness that is tricky to mass market in terms of a film setting. So like you had a play called Asshole that was about a man who was obsessed with his own asshole, like interacting with it, and like not just like I have one, but like I'm obsessed with like this on my body and like interacting with it. How, like, would be hard to like, hey, we're gonna play Asshole at TIFF, Asshole the movie for $80 million at TIFF. That's a very big ask. And so what I'm wondering is, how has your training in those trenches over in theater sort of sharpened your knives to come in and write something like Challengers, which is a sports movie, but not in the way you'd think. An obsession movie, but like not where it's going to end with a bunny boiler. Like it is, the world has to feel like it's going to end sort of emotionally, but the stakes are local. And I wanted to know if the way you were able to kind of play and stretch in theater in any way informed kind of like a sort of recklessness that comes about staging this like non-linear menage a trois, like erotically charged sports film.
Well, I think it was useful to me to learn a lot about myself as a storyteller and as an artist through theater, because I already had a sense of, you know, it's hard to say what a voice is, but I knew what kind of stories excited me, what kind of characters excited me, and what kind of thing I thought was worth putting in front of somebody for a couple hours, you know? And so when all of that carries over into screenwriting, because by that point, I already knew who I was, and I already knew what I liked, you know? And I think everybody is an expert in what they like. Everybody is the world's greatest expert in what they like, you know? And so I felt very equipped with that ammunition, you know? I think the form of screenwriting is really different. The way that a story is constructed isn't so different, because I think the structure of Challengers might strike people as having is more of a novel structure, you know, than a film structure. Though I don't even know how true that is. I think there are plenty of films with really experimental structures. But just in terms of the amount of real estate you have in a screenplay and the way a screenplay has to be formatted so that it's communicable to the hundreds of different people across dozens of departments who are going to have to make it. You know, in theater, for example, there's like a standard official way that a play is supposed to look on the page, but nobody follows that.
Okay.
And if you read 10 plays by 10 different playwrights you like, they're all going to look different on the page, because the way that something is written out on the page is meant to inform the way that it's going to be staged. You know, it's a sort of interpretive formatting. And in film, you just don't have that luxury, because that formatting needs to make sense to people who are reading the script in a very practical way, you know, who are trying to get practical information and practical guidance from it to do their jobs. So yeah, I think it's transitioning from theater to film was less of a holistic like rearrangement of the way I approached something and more of just an adjustment. a sort of practical, formal adjustment.
It's time for a quick break, but I'll be right back with more from Justin Kuritzkes. Then I'll have one quick thing before I go about the Cannes debut of Furiosa. So stick around for that.
Hello, teachers and faculty. This is Janet Varney. I'm here to remind you that listening to my podcast, The JV Club with Janet Varney, is part of the curriculum for the school year. Learning about the teenage years of such guests as Allison Brie, Vicki Peterson, John Hodgman, and so many more is a valuable and enriching experience. One you have no choice but to embrace because, yes, listening is mandatory. The JV Club with Janet Varney is available every Thursday on Maximum Fun or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember, no running in the halls.
If you need a laugh and you're on the go, try STOPPODCASTI.
Were you trying to put the name of the podcast there?
Yeah, I'm trying to spell it, but it's tricky.
Let me give it a try.
Okay.
If you need a laugh and you're on the go, call STOPPPAD. It'll never fit.
No, it will. Let me try. If you need a laugh and you're on the go, try STOPPPDCOO. We are so close.
Stop podcasting yourself.
A podcast from MaximumFun.org.
If you need a laugh and you're on the go.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I've been talking with challenger screenwriter and playwright Justin Kuritzkes, who is feeling seen by Brad Pitt's character Billy Beane in the 2011 film Moneyball. Let's get right back into that conversation. With Billy, he's such an interesting character because the stakes for him are different from almost anybody else in the movie. And it would kind of seem obvious. He's the GM of a baseball team. And for everybody else, it's getting the ring. It's getting through the World Series. It's putting fans at seats. It's making money. It's proving the model works, perhaps, for him and Jonah Hill's character. But they reach that landmark 20-win streak moment. The A's win 20 in a row, longest streak of all time to that point. And Jonah Hill is trying to take a moment to celebrate this. We reached 20. And Billy's thing is that's for the fans. That puts butts in the seats. It sells tickets. That's fun. But it's not anything.
It's hard not to be romantic about baseball. This kind of thing, it's fun for the fans. Sells tickets and hot dogs. Doesn't mean anything.
Billy, we just won 20 games in a row.
And what's the point?
We just got the record.
If we don't win the last game of the series, they'll dismiss us.
Billy.
I know these guys, I know the way they think, and they will erase us. And everything we've done here, none of it'll matter. Any other team wins the World Series, good for them. They're drinking champagne, they get a ring. But if we win, on our budget with this team, we'll change the game. And that's what I want. I want it to mean something.
And he basically winning is sort of obsolete to Billy. And what he wants to do is change baseball forever. He's like, if we win this, what it proves is that this model is how you can beat everyone else in baseball compared to the show pony thing that we watched at the beginning of the movie with all those scouts in one room. And what I wanted to ask you about that in terms of stakes and such and connecting to this character, what is your sort of do you have a paradigm for your own kind of success? Like you said, I would love to make something that gets people to throw a TV out the window. Is it good enough for you for it to be a success, or are you in for something else or something different or something you might perceive as more?
That's an amazing question. I mean,
A small scale question, just throwing the answer out there.
I don't know how to answer it directly, but I do know that there's a scene in Moneyball that I think about a lot when it comes to that, which is that Billy doesn't watch the games, right?
Yeah.
Billy, and he almost feels like it's like when he watches them, he's cursing them a little bit. Like it's
yeah.
Like during, I think,
which is very baseball.
Yeah, I think during the 20-win streak, like the day they're about to get it, he shows up for a second because his ex-wife tells him he needs to go, and his daughter
she's like, we're really proud of you. Like, you've done a great job.
Okay.
Oh, Casey wants to talk to you. Hang on.
Hey, are you on your way to the stadium?
No, I'm on my way to Visalia to see our minor league team.
Turn around, please, Dad.
No way, Jose.
Turn around,
Nope.
Come on, Dad.
Not gonna happen.
You're not gonna jinx it.
I'll talk to you later, sweetheart. I love you.
And that like takes him, he does a U-turn practically on the freeway and is like, I'm going to the stadium. I'm going to O.co.
Yeah, and he goes and then he watches and they start losing and he can't take it. And so he leaves. And then, he is like I think he's sitting in the office when they win, right? Or
I think he might be back in the gym. I think he might be back in the gym because he seems to spend a lot of time in the gym when they're playing games.
Right. And I really related to that. Like we had a lot of big premieres for this movie and the experience of sitting through those, even though I love the movie and I love watching people experience the movie, is like horrible for me. I and it's not because I'm
sorry.
Not having a good time. It's just because it's not for me anymore. The movie is not for me. It's not for me to enjoy. So it's sort of I used to do that in theater too, that I would have the best time watching my play by not actually watching it, but sitting behind the stage and just listening to, not even being able to hear the play, but just being able to hear the audience's reaction, And now when I go like do a Q&A or something, I really like standing outside the door to the theater, but I don't really like going in and watching. So I think there is a weird thing that movie really captures, which is that this thing that you devote your life to and, devote all your energy to, once it's actually there and once it's in front of you, that's actually, you actually feel kind of alienated from it because that's not, that wasn't the point, as cheesy as it is, the point was getting there. Where you win or where you feel enlivened was in the making of it, which is why, again, like Billy is never happier or more alive than in that scene in the office when he's munching on popcorn that's in a coffee filter, which is amazing. It's the best.
And when the call comes in, he immediately spits all of it out into his mouth.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And what's so good about that is that or at least I connect to that so deeply, this feeling of that actually the moment that this thing made me happiest is this very private moment that no one except the people I made this with will ever know about, and especially with writing, which you do alone, it's completely private. These moments of joy you get from working, they're really just yours. And so I think Billy is interesting in that he's a character that's really trying to get everybody to see the vision. But even if they don't see the vision, he's trying to get everybody to have faith in it, or if they don't have faith in it, which is another part of making stuff, which is dealing with that. And figuring out how to make it happen anyway, I
mean, that sounds like when George Miller is making Mad Max Fury Road, it like like Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy both talked about like the kind of misery of making that movie because they could only see the parts of it. And George was sort of the only one who could see the whole.
Right.
And so the making of it was arduous and hard and painful. And it was like, what the fuck are we out here doing this for? And it wasn't until they saw it all come together that it was like, wow, he saw this movie in his head the entire time because we couldn't have possibly understood really what we were working toward until we saw him assemble it together.
Yeah.
So now we get it. But at the time, that was really fucking hard to follow that guy into the fight because it was too big for us to scope at the time.
Yeah, which you can imagine when you're shooting, like the same tennis point 30 times from 20 different setups. It feels like that. You do feel like, you have to just have this sort of blind faith in the, and a sort of, you have to be faithful to the conviction you once had,
Yeah.
to the conviction that this was a good idea.
Is that hard work for you? Have you found does that sort of inherent to the process at every point you have to kind of like check in with, okay, remember when you had the invigorated, fresh conviction of this project, you got to hang on to that? Or do you find that that's easy for you to maintain throughout in those phases of disbelief or when it's muddied down by the 30th take of one shot or like the staging of like when you're staging a play or do you find that an accessible feeling for you? Or do you have to fight to hold on to it?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy. When it's easy when you're writing is when the characters are surprising you. When it feels like they're starting to move on their own.
Yeah.
And you're starting to learn about where this thing is going from them. That's really exciting. And that sort of, when it happens, you're aware of it and you don't want to, it's very sort of a precious moment in writing because it's fleeting,
Yeah.
But hopefully as you're doing it, there's enough of those moments that you can propel yourself to get to the end. And in making a movie, you have a similar thing. I had the privilege of being on set for the whole time we were making Challengers.
That's fantastic.
And being in pre-production the whole time. And so any day that it was hard or I was, trying to rework something because of a practical issue or whatever and was having trouble, something like the props show and tell would happen, where you have our amazing props guys, Matt Marks and Mike Drury, lay out 1,000 different tennis rackets and we get to choose which ones make sense for the characters at the different points in their lives. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is bliss again, So yeah, I think any sort of creative process is a mixture of those feelings.
I really that, you talking about like when you're on the 30th setup of the same shot and it is making me think about how like I know plenty of people who are like, I don't want to read process things. Like, I don't want to demystify it. Like, I want to just like have it be just the movie in my mind. But I find for me, it's the opposite. The more I see of how movies are made, the more I'm a part of how movies are made or the more sets I'm on, the less sense it makes to me, actually. Like the more intricacies, the more details, the more like starting point of raw materials to ending package of shiny scene, the less it makes sense to me that these things can exist and they feel all the more like miracles or magic.
I think that's very real. Yeah, the more you know, the more you know you don't know about the process.
And the more you know that it's like, wait, we have all this time. We're going to spend, like, say we're going to spend a month somewhere and it's going to turn out to be 90 minutes. It's going to turn out to be 2 hours. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, there's no possible way we can winnow down the labor of hundreds into 2 hours of a story. I mean, that is remarkable. It's insane that it's possible.
It's crazy. And it's a very strange feeling when you watch the first assembly of a movie that you've been a part of making, because you have this insane feeling of knowing exactly how much work went into every second of that thing and knowing how long it all took. And then it's over in, an hour and a half or 2 hours. And you sort of feel like, that's it. But we worked for so long. What do you mean?
We
That was
set
it?
that up 30 times.
Yeah,
They're
right.
not all going to see everything we did to
Yes.
make this happen. It's
No.
insane.
But thank God they don't see what we did to make this happen.
Yeah, not even a double-edged sword. Just good thing they did it, honestly.
No, yeah, good thing they didn't. Good thing they didn't.
Well, like working in, because like you've had like obviously you have a YouTube channel, you've made like these videos of like characters that you've done, like, and I wanted to hear from you about just like I wanted to hear from you about the joy and like, because you talked about like once you're writing and you realize the creators, the characters that writing are sort of they have movement on their own. And I wanted to hear from you about like that kind of character play in your own space and that sort of satisfaction to you of just like, I'm dicking around in photo booth and I'm doing these things because it's fun for me. Like, and because it, from the perspective of like music and novelization and playwriting and screenwriting and doing just like, shit that you enjoy on the internet. Like there is a commitment to just creating characters in a lot of places through a lot of formats. And I wanted to hear about like the joy of that for you, of inhabiting a character and then making a character and then giving us characters. Like you said, then it's ours and it belongs to all of us.
Well, that's the thing that I think is consistent across all the different mediums, is that it's always about gradually discovering a character, and gradually letting an audience discover a character. Those YouTube videos came out of, I was in college writing my senior thesis, which became the play that I put on in New York for the first, my first sort of off-Broadway play in New York was this play. And I was really intensely involved in writing this thing, and it was taking up all my time. And then at night I would be really exhausted, and I just sort of was messing around in photo booth as a way to blow off steam, kind of. And I realized that if you moved your face, it would create two different distortions. And so you could create two different characters. And that kind of felt like an extension of a lot of stuff I had been doing in theater. And so what became exciting about those videos after I was in New York and working as a playwright, and, they ended up sort of getting an audience.
Yeah, they took off.
Yeah, in for YouTube, a small way, but for me as a playwright in New York, it was a big way. And what was exciting about those was that, unlike a theater or a film where there's so many moving parts that have to come together and so many different layers of permission you have to get your work in front of an audience. With those things, I got to be the studio and the performer and the movie theater.
It's nice to just have all the say in making something.
Yeah, and they cost nothing, and I could upload them 5 minutes after I made them. And so that was really thrilling, to have that kind of complete freedom in that way. Yeah.
Another really key element of Billy in this is everyone is telling him why this won't work.
Totally.
And he's doing something new. And I feel like, in the paralleling to like independent production and making a movie, do you as a creator feel like you have been able to flourish in challenging ideas? Do you feel like you have had to advocate for yourself in a substantial way because you are coming up against naysayers? Like, where does that part of the Billy Beane story work in terms of you as an artist? Like, do you feel like it's difficult to move the needle towards something more different and interesting? Or have you found that that's actually been like a joyful part of creation and you've not really been stopped along the way?
Well, I've had very different experiences in film than I had in theater, in film, I've been really incredibly fortunate in that, this thing that I wrote on spec, just really for myself, ended up getting put together really quickly with these incredible collaborators, So, yeah, I think the distance between when I wrote the first draft of Challengers and when we went into pre-production was a couple months.
Congratulations on winning the lottery. It's very exciting.
Right. So it didn't, so I didn't really experience it there. And it was a studio movie, and the studio wanted to make the movie we wanted to make. So that was kind of a very different experience than what I had in theater, which is subscriber based. especially, Broadway is for profit, but off Broadway, where most of the newer and let's say more experimental stuff is happening, is all at the whims of subscribers.
Got it.
Nonprofits essentially. And that's a naturally hard to move. It's hard to move that subscriber base forward, or move them outside of what they have been conditioned to think that they want. Because theaters are not incentivized by profit, you don't even get the benefit of that, which is its own completely fucked up model, right? Which is its own sort of conservative force in any art, is the profit motivation. But in theater, there's not even that.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a black box.
Yeah, you're not even trying to make Bank of America happy. You're trying to make like the heirs of the Bank of America fortune who are donating to the theater happy, right?
Who don't need your money. They just want to be satisfied.
They just want to be satisfied, right? So it's a really complex thing. I mean, that's a bit more cynical than maybe it really is. And by the way, it has nothing to do with the people who work in theater. The people who work in theater are all, for the most part, incredibly sincere in their desire to push the art form forward, and are like some of my favorite people in the world are the people who work in theater. But the structure of it is, even though it's full of people who are very progressive, the structure of it is incredibly conservative. So I've definitely dealt with that in that space. In film, it's too early for me to say what it looks like in film. I sort of feel like I just got here, so I don't have any prognosis or I don't have a diagnosis of the state of the film industry.
Well, good of you to take time to make your assessment. I am so sad that I have to stop talking to you now, but such is the reality of schedules. I'm so glad that Luca Guadagnino brought you to the dance, that Amy Pascal and brought you to the dance, because, it was lightning in a bottle, it seems like, to get Challengers made, and you made lightning in a bottle with Challengers.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for a tremendous picture and for your time with us today and being so generous with it, Justin.
Thank you so much. This was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again to Justin Kuritzkes. If you haven't seen Challengers yet, what are you waiting for? We don't even have to link to it in the show notes. You can just go to a theater near you and see this smash success, because it is one hell of a time at the cinema. It's a little sexy. It's a little sporty. It's a lot of Zendaya-y. How could you go wrong with any of that? And now the one quick thing before I go, it's got to be quick, because I haven't seen it yet, but Furiosa debuted just, let's say, moments ago at the Cannes Film Festival, and the early reviews, the early feedback seems really strong. Richard Lawson over at Vanity Fair liked it. The Rolling Stone review was giving it some thumbs up. I cannot imagine following an act like Mad Max Fury Road. It was one thing with, George Miller made 3,000 Years of Longing, which is actually really good movie. I wish more people had seen it in theaters, but that wasn't how are you going to chase Mad Max Fury Road with 3,000 Years of Longing? It's a completely different movie. That's not how do you follow up this experience with this completely different experience? But this is, how do you follow one of the definitive action films of all time, one of the definitive films of the 21st century, a fourth installment in an iconic franchise like Mad Max that Miller started decades ago in the thriving era of Ozploitation. And now you're going to come at us with a Furiosa movie and be like, hey guys, I know you're all still super jacked up about Fury Road from all those years ago, but I'm going to try and bottle that feeling for you again and not make the same movie, but make you feel kind of guzzling and chrome intensity about this as well. And we're going to put Anya Taylor-Joy in it. And you know what? That's my thing. In Anya Taylor-Joy, I trust. I trust her judgment. I trust her performances. I trust George. He made Happy Feet, too. I really like Happy Feet. The thing I'm most excited about for this movie is seeing Chris Hemsworth as an Australian madman directed by an Australian filmmaker. This is where I want to see his career go in a post-mega franchise landscape. Again, I can't say too much because I haven't seen it yet, but I was stoked before. The reviews are having me even more stoked. Can gave it a standing ovation, which I would love to say is like the definitive word on it, but Can will clap overwhelmingly or boo overwhelmingly for kind of literally anything. What are you going to do? They booed Personal Shopper. Like, what is that? So who knows? But it seems like trending positive. And I think of among the feeling seen folks, I'm not the only one who's super hyped for this movie. So let's dare to hope. Let's dare to hold on to a little optimism. And that is our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm JorCru on Twitter, JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported directly by you.